Chapter 12. The cornfield was the field closest to the main road. I felt kind of funny driving the tractor around where I could be seen. Carbondale Ranch was off the beaten path for most of my friends, but I was still worried that someone I knew might come out this way. I really didn't want to be seen and then labeled Tractor Boy or something stupid like that at school. But after a while I got into what I was doing, and I quit watching the road. I was having a great time. If anyone had told me a week ago that I would enjoy my community service, I would have laughed at them. Actually, I would have laughed at the idea of me liking any kind of job. Spreading manure wasn't a glamorous job. It required just the right amount of effort and concentration to make it interesting, but not enough to make it frustrating. The first day I used the spreader, I didn't pay enough attention, and it jammed. By the time I noticed the jam, I had to go back and redo half the field. The air was brisk and cold. I must have been getting used to the job because it didn't smell that much. Well, it smelled, but it didn't stink. It kind of had a warm, earthy smell. The sky was calm with blankets of thick gray clouds, and the forecast was calling for snow by Sunday evening. It was only about 45 degrees, but it felt really good. The border of the field had trees planted every 5 to 10 feet, and their leaves had almost completely changed to gold and orange. While I was using the spreader, I saw several rabbits leaving their homes, just as I was about to drop a load on them. They were cute, but nothing spectacular. Then, just as I was getting ready to go in for lunch, I saw him, a fox. He was sitting on the edge of the field, just watching me. He looked like a strange combination of cat and dog. He was sitting up straight with his tail wrapped around his front paws. His coat was a dull orange, not the bright red I always thought foxes had. We watched each other for a few minutes and started to get creepy. I even got goosebumps. It really felt like he was looking at me for some reason. Then he turned his head to the side for a moment. I looked the same way to see what he had heard or smelled, and when I looked back, he was gone. I looked back again to where the fox had looked, and this time I saw what had scared him away. Rick was walking along the road by the field. I froze. I knew if I ran, it would definitely get his attention. Rick was, in a lot of ways, like a bird of prey. He only caught on to things if there was action around, and his brain was approximately the same size as a bird's. If he thought I was just some farm boy jerk, he probably wouldn't pay any attention to me. He glanced at me, and then he looked back at the road. I slid off the tractor and headed toward the house. "Yo, Sean!" I jumped. He had bellowed really loud, and I turned around slowly. He was standing on the second bar of the fence, leaning forward. "I don't know where you've been, but you better not come back to school. I'll kill you, man." I flipped him the bird and just started walking to the house again. I made myself walk slowly, even though I wanted to desperately break into a run. Rick didn't make threats lightly. When I got to the end of the field, I turned and looked back. He was still there, just watching me. No, he didn't make threats lightly at all. I wandered back into the main house, stopping to say hi to the little black and white calf that got me in trouble on the first day I was here. Then I detoured to the stables to check on Nicker. He was trying to chew on the hay. I took that as a good sign. He needed to get off the bottle quickly because it took valuable time to feed him by hand like that. I liked doing it, but I wasn't sure how long I'd be around. There was a strange car in front of the house when I came back from the stable. I went directly to the bathroom to wash up, and then to the kitchen to help James. "Where's Mr. H?" I asked, pouring 3 glasses of milk. James set another empty glass in front of me. "Pour 4. The judge is here, and it looks like he'll be staying for lunch." "Oh," I said, feeling a knot start in the bottom of my stomach. "How long has he been here?" "About an hour. Oh, hey, the hospital called. Your mom's now in stable condition. She'll be released in a few days." "Okay, thanks." We finished making the soup and sandwiches in relative silence. It was a comfortable silence, though. We were both concentrating on working and waiting for Mr. H to come in. When he did, the judge who had sentenced me to community service was right behind him. He walked up to me, stopping only 6 inches away. We locked gazes. After Mr. H, though, this guy was easy to stare down. He gave me one quick nod. "You're looking good, boy. I knew Dave would bring you around faster than anyone else. That's why I made sure you came here instead of some other place." "Sean's been working real hard," Mr. H said from the kitchen table. which is a big change from hardly working, James said, elbowing me. We sat down to eat, and I almost felt like it was the first day all over again. I didn't say much of anything, and I felt all out of place. I tensed each time the judge brought up the name of a former community service kid. Mr. H could always explain exactly where the kid was and what he was doing. Toward the end of the meal, Mr. H turned to me. "How'd the cornfield look?" "Good," I said. "I got most of it done. I should be able to finish with no problem tomorrow." Mr. Hassler didn't even take his eyes off me. It was the first time in the conversation that he had given me his undivided attention. "I saw a fox." He raised his eyebrows. "By the cornfield?" I nodded. That's unusual. We haven't had any foxes here for a few years. Too much traffic and too many big dogs running around. Not that I've minded not having foxes, though." "What's wrong with foxes? I thought he looked kind of cool." Mr. H shrugged and looked uncomfortable. James and the judge were grinning at him. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe it sounds silly, but foxes have always bothered me. They just seem—" "Creepy?" I asked, remembering the goosebumps. "Exactly," he agreed. "They seem creepy, and sometimes it seemed to me that they brought bad luck, so I always kept a couple dogs around in case the traffic wasn't enough to keep the foxes away." "Abe was the last dog you had here, wasn't he?" the judge asked. James and Mr. Hassler said yes at the same time. "And how long has it been since Abe died?" asked the judge. "Just over a year." "I keep telling him it's time to get another dog," James said, "but he just won't listen to me." "What kind of dog was he?" I asked. "He was a German Shepherd." "Why don't you want another one?" I hadn't thought about it before, but now I realized the only thing that was missing from the ranch was a dog. "All ranches need dogs. Isn't it a federal law or something?" The judge and James laughed. Mr. Hassler smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I think it's a law, but they excuse you from it when there's a good chance the dog would outlive the rancher. I'm not getting any younger, and I don't know how long I'll keep the ranch. With my luck, I'll pick a dog, and he'll live for the next 12 years. "You'll outlive all of us, Dave," the judge chuckled. "You need a dog," I told Mr. H. "Good luck, Sean. I was telling him a few months before Abe died that he needed to get a new puppy. Abe would have been able to train him and take over the ranch." "Well, that's what I've kept you for, James, so you'll know what to do with the ranch when I'm gone." They all laughed, but I really didn't find anything amusing. Talking about Mr. Hassler dying and leaving his ranch to James didn't make me laugh at all. We finished the meal with some carrot cake. As I went to do the dishes, the judge asked me to show him around the ranch. "I haven't been here for a while. I'd like to see the place from a new person's point of view." I looked instinctively at Mr. H. He dropped me a wink and barely moved his head forward. "Yes," he was saying, "you need to go." "Sure," I said. "Just give me a few minutes to finish the dishes." "Come on, Frank. We'll leave these two pups with the dishes. Sean can meet us out by Nicker's stall." James and I really didn't try to hurry and finish the dishes, and I was glad. I didn't know what the judge wanted. I didn't like judges or cops. They had never helped me before. 3 times the social workers had been out to see me because of the reports the cops and judges had filed. They made me lie. I had to tell them what a wonderful person my mother was. If I had ever told them the truth, they would have taken me away from everything I had ever known. I would rather stay where I knew the rules. But Mr. H trusted this judge. They seemed to be friends. Maybe I could trust him too. When I got to Nicker's stall, the judge was waiting by himself. "I hear you helped deliver this guy," he said as I walked up. "Yeah." "You ever deliver a baby before?" "No," I grinned at him. "It was a real eye-opening experience." He laughed. "I bet. But now you've got practical experience if you decide to become a vet." "I guess so." "Have you given much thought about what you want to be?" I shook my head. "Haven't thought about it at all." He didn't seem surprised or worried by my answer. "You've got plenty of time. Some kids decide what they want to be when they're in elementary school. I almost think that it limits them too much as they get older. It's important to explore things as you grow up." He cocked an eyebrow. "Legal things, that is. Exploring underage drinking and curfew violations are not necessarily good things to explore." "I wasn't caught drinking," I began. "You weren't caught," he interrupted, "because you left early. I'm sure if I call some of the kids caught at the party the sheriff busted the night you were brought in, I'd find several who would remember you being there. I shifted from one foot to the other, concentrating on playing with Nicker's ears. But I'm not here to talk about that. I looked at him. Then what are you here to talk about? I'm here because Dave thinks maybe you need someone to talk to, and also to get your statement about what happened last night. I swallowed hard. You mean between Mr. H and my father? Yep. Nicker butted me, and I had my back to the judge. I couldn't tell what he was thinking or feeling. I wouldn't have been able to anyway. I couldn't even tell what I was thinking or feeling. What do you need to know? Well, I guess I'd like you to tell me in your own words what happened at the hospital last night. Actually, there's not much I can tell you. I wasn't there when he hit my father. Sean, how about you just start from the beginning? What happened last night after James left? So I told him. He didn't make any comments, just occasionally asked a question to make sure he understood what I meant. So your father gave you money, and then you tried to introduce him to Dave. Yes. But your father wouldn't shake Dave's hand, and that made you angry. Yeah, it did. That plus the fact he acted like he could just waltz in and be part of my life again. When Dave was yelling at you in the field, how'd you feel? I felt like I had really let him down, like maybe I lost the chance to come back here. How did that make you feel? It bugged me, really bugged me. Did you ever feel like he was going to hurt you? Were you ever afraid he was going to hit you? No, he wouldn't do that. We left the stables and walked along the edge of the cornfield. Dave says he found you sleeping in Nicker's stall on Wednesday morning. Yeah. Had you been there all night? Yeah. Why? I told him about the fight I had with my mom. Explain to me again how you hurt your head. The second time she slammed me into the wall, my head hit a nail. We had walked around the cornfield and were now approaching the paddock. Several horses were out grazing. Has your father been paying child support? He asked abruptly. Oh yeah, he's too afraid not to. What do you mean? His image is important to him. He doesn't want to look bad. The court said he had to pay us money, so he does. He believes in maintaining a perfect record. I'm sure he was there to pick up Mom's hospital bill because he didn't want people to think he was cold. The judge started to say something, hesitated, and then said, Let's come back to this later. This fight with your mother, was that the first one? I stopped and leaned against the fence, watching the pregnant mares graze. No. How often does it happen? I lose count. It's never the same from week to week. I can never tell what will set her off. I know it's not me, though. Does that make it easier to accept? Sort of. We walked and talked for nearly 2 hours. Finally, we started heading back to the house. Sean, how many other people know all the things you just told me today? No one. Not even Dave? I shook my head, then added, Well, he knows some of it because he was there, but he doesn't know all of it. Have you ever talked to any of your teachers about these things? I blinked in surprise. Why would I? Mrs. Walker, maybe, or Mr. Thomas. Why would I repeated. There are several teachers who care a great deal for you, Sean, even though you may not know it. Mrs. Walker caught me as I was going to talk to your principal the other day. She seemed especially concerned. I was too surprised to say anything. I wanted to know what they had said about me, both the principal and Mrs. Walker, but I was afraid to ask. So if you haven't talked to anyone who knows you, why are you telling me, a complete stranger? I stopped and looked at him. Because he asked me to. Dave? I nodded. He didn't ask you to tell him what happened the night you got the concussion? Yeah, he did. So why are you telling me now? I kicked the dirt and turned in a half circle towards the dropping sun. I want to make sure he doesn't get in trouble for what happened last night. He stuck his neck out for me, and he shouldn't get his head chopped off for it. So you're doing this for him? I guess. What do you think will happen now that you and I have talked, and that you've told me this? I don't know. What do you want to happen? If you could pick your future, what would you do? I don't know, I repeated. You must have some ideas. You've told me all the other stuff. Why won't you tell me this? Because then you might take it away. He looked at me. I can't take away what you don't have, Sean. I didn't say anything. Well, how are you feeling about your dad now? What do you mean? What do you think about him? I don't, I said flatly. He raised his eyebrows at that moment, and he looked a lot like Mr. H. He just waited. I stopped, trying to gather my thoughts. I didn't know how to explain to him how I felt about my dad. I guess I feel like he let me down. And how does that make you feel? Angry. That I knew. Do you know why your dad left? He said it was for a better job. Why? So he could make more money. The judge said slowly, well, he told me that he left for the better job in hopes that he could convince a judge to give him custody. I stared at him. You talked to my dad? Yes, he said. My dad? You're sure you talked to my dad? This morning. I shook my head. He's lying. Why would he do that? Because he's just trying to look good. I would, why would you want a worthless case like me back? And even if he did want custody, then why hasn't he come to see me for years? He hasn't even called, I blurted out. Well, the judge said slowly, he says he has tried. He says at first when he called, either no one answered, or when your mom did answer, she hung up on him. When he finally figured out what time you would be home, you hung up on him. I kicked the dirt clod in the road. Further, the judge continued, he says that he's tried to drop by several times in the last month since he's moved back, but no one's home when he does. I opened my mouth to ask the judge why he hadn't left a note for me, but then shut it again. I remembered very clearly coming home once with my mother and seeing her snatch a piece of paper from the door and crumple it up, swearing. I had always assumed it was a bill. Maybe it wasn't. Sean, I looked at him. Your dad would like the chance to see you and talk to you. The judge paused, probably trying to gauge my reaction. He's dropping the charges against Dave. He said he just lost his temper because he was hurt and jealous that you'd rather spend time with Dave. He said that after he got home, he realized that he should be happy for you found someone to stay with, but he'd still like a chance. I looked at the judge. He stared back impassively, not trying to push me one way or the other, just laying out the options. I looked off towards the stable. Does he want me to come here, or does he want me to go see him? The judge smiled. I'm sure he'd be happy with either. Do you think you could give him a call tonight? Maybe talk about the time when you would want to see him? Maybe, I said, swallowing hard. Fair enough. Now will you tell me what you want your future to look like? I still don't know. I'm offering you a chance, Sean. I don't have any choices, I said flatly. I deal with what life gives me. It doesn't make much difference whether it comes from my parents, judges, or teachers, because it's never my choice. It's always someone else's. Well, if you won't express your choices, maybe right now it's going to have to come from someone else. Let me tell you what I think your choices are, he sighed. I think it's safe to say you won't be going back to your mother anytime soon. We'll just have to wait and see what terms you and your dad can work out. And maybe you can talk Dave into one of his summer job positions. Other possibilities may come up. I just can't think of anything else right now. He stopped for breath. How does that sound? I thought about it for a minute. Okay, good, he smiled. Now go get that colt used to being groomed. That was your chore for the afternoon, wasn't it? Yes, I hesitated. Thank you, Judge, I said awkwardly, holding out my hand. He shook it in a firm grasp. Thank you, Sean, for taking the time to shed some light on the situation, and for being willing to give someone a second chance. He headed back towards the house. I watched until I heard him yell, Dave! Before the door swung shut. Then I headed to the stable.